Today, me and Tuck are going to show you how to tie and prune your tomatoes. I believe this technique will change your life when it comes to growing tomatoes. It did for me. Let's go! When it comes to tomatoes, growing them vertically is the way to go. Pruning your indeterminate tomatoes to a single stem and growing them up a string or even a stake will help in so many ways. First off, it saves space. Also, it decreases the chances of your tomatoes getting disease issues, and it makes it much easier to manage your plants and grab harvests from them. Over the years, I've used a number of different methods to grow my tomatoes vertically, and I have refined how I do things to make it easy, convenient, and highly productive. When I first started growing tomatoes, I would grow them up a bamboo stake. I still do this for some tomatoes, but this way of growing vertically does present a few downsides. One is the tomatoes will get so tall late in the season that you basically need a ladder to harvest them. I have had many tomatoes get over 10 feet tall, and my new method that I'm going to share with you solves this problem. I still do like growing some tomatoes up a stake because it allows me to fill open space that I have in the garden. For instance, if I have a spot here or a spot here that has a good amount of space, I'll just stick a tomato in the ground and attach it to a stake. Back here too. I felt like I had a gap of space back here, so stuck a tomato in, put a stake in the ground, now I can grow it up the stake. Another thing is I like growing some of my big, heavy beefsteak varieties of tomatoes up a stake because the stake provides a good, strong support for those heavy tomatoes. To tie the tomatoes to the stake, originally I would cut up an old shirt into strips and use that to tie the tomato to the stake. Just make sure you tie the shirt around the stake and then around the tomato to prevent the shirt from sliding up and down the stake too much. If you want, you could use this plant Velcro to attach your plant to the stake. I've done this in the past, but it doesn't work that well for me. Now I use this polypropylene twine. I take it and I tie it around the base of my stake pretty tight, just like this. Then what I'll do is I'll grab this clip right here. I really love these clips. So I'll take this clip, I'll push it into the back of the string, and then I'll just clip this around the tomato. You can see, just like this. We'll clip it around the tomato. It's quick, it's easy to do, and you could also just take the clip off if necessary and adjust it. I have also grown tomatoes vertically using a trellis that I built and some twine. I took the twine and wrapped it around the tomatoes, but I have found a few downsides to this style as well. I would tie the twine to the top of the trellis, then run the string down to the base of the tomato and tie it loosely to the bottom of the tomato plant. Some people bury the twine when planting the tomato, which you can do if you want. Then I would carefully twist the twine around the tomato plant, mostly going under the leaves. You can see it twisted around the plant here. You don't want to twist it around the plant too many times that it will strangle the plant, but you want it to be enough to provide it with good, strong support. I found that style worked okay, but it didn't solve the problem of the tomatoes getting too tall. Another thing was when the wind would blow really strong, it would blow the tomatoes and that would kind of yank at the string and also pull at like the base of the tomato plant, which I did not like. The new method I'm going to bring you over to now, the one that I use, solved all these problems. Here is how I prefer growing my tomatoes now. It's a trellis that I built and it has a few really cool, useful features to it. First of all, this tomato roller solves the problem of the tomato plants getting too tall. You can release this mechanism right here and it releases more twine. As the tomatoes start to reach the top of the trellis, you just release twine and drop them down. This is known as lowering and leaning. Since tomatoes are vines, they will take well to this approach, and instead of just growing straight up, the tomatoes will lean and it will drastically reduce their height. This way, where the tomatoes are fruiting is within reach. It makes it both easier and safer to work on and harvest tomatoes when you could do it from the ground. Another added feature is this piece of wood down here that I tie the string to. So let me show you how I do it. I'll just take this string, run it through this piece of wood down here, and then tie it. The reason I do this, and I think it really helps, is because when this tomato starts to grow and get tall, when the wind blows and the string gets pulled at, this string pulls at this piece of wood down here. instead of pulling at the base of the tomato. I also make sure when I'm tying the string that it's not super tight. I want the string to be able to kind of sway a little bit with the wind, and I want the tomato to be able to sway with it. If the string is super tight and the wind blows, then the tomato is going to take a lot of the brunt of that movement. Instead, when it's like this, they can kind of swing together, and then all the pulling and the stress is put on the piece of wood instead of on the base of the tomato plant. To attach my tomatoes to the string, I use these tomato clips. Let me show you how easy it is to use. First, take our clip and push it into the back side of the string, just like this. Then take your clip, wrap it around the stem, and just close the clip until you hear it snap. You should hear it just like that. The string locks into the back side of the clip, so the clip doesn't slide up and down the string. The clips are also easy to detach if you need to. You can just press this side in and then unclips just like that. When attaching the clip, it's important to put it in the right location. I put it right below one of the fan leaves. The thing is, if it's a new fan leaf, it might be pointed up and then over time drop down to about 90 degrees. So you don't want to put it directly below the fan leaf. You want to leave a little bit of space so as that leaf matures, it can drop down and the clip won't be in the way. I will add clips about every 6 inches up the plant to make sure that there is plenty support. Adding a lot of clips will also make sure that the weight of the plant is evenly distributed among many clips rather than just a few clips bearing all the weight of the plant. Another thing I will do is add additional clips to some trusses of fruit or some heavy sets of beefsteak tomatoes just to make sure that there's enough support and that the plant doesn't get damaged. In the future, when your tomato plants get so tall that you need to lower and lean them, you could remove the clips at the bottom of the plant that aren't bearing any weight anymore and reuse them higher up on the plant. So it's like you can kind of recycle those clips, which is nice. The final feature is this mini raised bed at the bottom. It's 1 foot wide and 10 feet long. This allows me to grow 10 tomatoes in 10 square feet. One of the great things about this mini raised bed, it allows everything to be maintained in this small area. For instance, if I put fertilizer down or I water this section, all the water is concentrated in this small raised bed, so it helps to capture all of that. Another thing is it works perfect for later in the season when I want to add some diced leaf mulch or some wood chips around. This kind of can keep the mulch in that area. So if I was to add leaves, it would stay in this section instead of just being like blown away. This bed also gives me something to attach this bottom brace piece to right here. And what I do is I knock some stakes in like you see right here, and then I attach my bed to those stakes. This way it is strong and doesn't get blown over, because when these tomato plants get large and they have fruit on them and the wind blows, it creates a lot of resistance. By kind of locking everything together and then knocking in stakes and connecting the whole thing, it makes it much stronger and it's less liable to be blown over in some of those strong summer winds. Let me show you, come down here, some of these tomatoes down here. Like you'll notice some of these leaves, these lower leaves, are losing a little bit of color. What I'll do is I'll just remove a lot of these lower leaves. Anything that is going to potentially come into contact with the ground, we always want to remove, because there's a lot of soil-borne diseases. We don't want our plants touching any part of the soil, or that could bring some of those diseases up the plant. In the future, I will show you a more detailed explanation of how I prune my tomatoes. This is more about trellising and tying them. But one thing we always want to do when growing up a single stem, you'll see right here, is remove the suckers. Look at that right there, that little mini growth. It almost looks like a little new tomato plant growing out of the center. We'll remove these suckers, and that's what will cause our plants to grow up a single stem. If you see this here, we want it to continue growing up one single stem and continue to tie this one stem to the string. Me and Tuck are happy with how the tomatoes are growing. He's been out here kind of just wandering around. Look at him over there. He's not a huge fan of tomatoes, but he's still working hard out here. You can see the tomatoes are growing beautifully in our trellis. Really happy with the health of them, especially for how cool it's been late here. So I showed you guys the tomato clips. These right here, I love using these. Some people say that they only last a season. That's probably true. They don't last a super long time, but they're really, really convenient and they're not that expensive. I get mine on Amazon for like $17 for 200, but right now they're only like $11.99, $12 for 200 of them. So they're not that expensive, but they'll save you so much time that it makes it worth it in my opinion. They're like One of the most convenient things, I use them for tomatoes, I use them for cucumbers, I use them for all my trellising crops because it just makes it so simple to tie things up. Another thing I showed was these tomato rollers. These made a massive difference for me growing. Again, a lot of this whole idea of this style, the lowering and leaning is what makes it so much better than some of the other methods. Like growing it up a stake, they get so tall you have to use a ladder, or growing them with the string and wrapping it, you're not getting that advantage of being able to lowering and lean. So lowering and leaning is huge when it comes to growing tall tomatoes up a single stem, and this tool makes it so you can. And growing tomatoes vertically like this, you're going to get a lower yield per plant. But if you back up a little bit, you can see I have 20 plants in just this small area. So even though it's going to be a lower yield per plant, we're going to get a higher yield overall. And our plants are going to be easier to manage. They're going to have less disease problems because they're getting more airflow and more light penetration. So overall, it's just such a great way to do it. So this is a tomato roller hook that I get from Johnny Seeds. These ones are super high quality. I'll put a link for them. This is the one that I get from Amazon. They're a little cheaper and they're not as high quality, but they still work relatively well. So I'll put a link for both these down below. You can decide which one that you want to use. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. The asparagus are starting to finish up, but Tuck's still making sure he gets some fresh snacks from them. Spam some hearts down low if you love seeing the little boss in the videos. We had a blast out here. We hope you got some value out of the video. We hope you try to push the limits and grow as much food as you possibly can in your backyard and get some fresh, organic, homegrown food. There's literally nothing like it. Me and Tuck wanted to send a thank you to one of our new channel members, Vernie Streff. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. The garden is looking fantastic. The beds are filling up. The brassicas are getting close to finishing. In a short amount of time, we're just going to be pulling so much food out of the garden, and the tomatoes are setting up to have a fantastic year also. Tuck and James will be back again real soon. We out.